Faisal, you're up next.
First of all, Tom, I had cake today, which is very unusual. And I just got to understand that I was celebrating your birthday. So I've done my part. Yeah.
Okay, well, if you're not used to eating sugar, then you had a pretty strong reaction to that cake.
I'm doing much better than I used to. So I'm on my way. I'm on my way there. Yeah. So my question is, Tom, I've listened to you talk about dreams in the only way that has ever made sense to me, learning all this MBT as well. So I've always had a theme of stuckness in my dreams since I was a kid. So it would be stuckness in movement, like I want to get somewhere and I just can't move, or my voice is not coming out. I'm trying to tell somebody something. So, I mean, those kind of things. In the last couple of years, and I've worked a lot on all kinds of fear in my life. In the last couple of years, what's happened is these dreams do still come along, but I'm not scared or panicked in the dream anymore. So I'm there and I'm like, okay, I'll wait this out. So this is like completely like there's no fear that I feel while I'm dreaming or even as I wake up. So this has been happening for the last couple of years. So my question is it my job to figure the rest of it out, or do I just let it run its course because it's taken such a long time in this phase as well? Is there something that I need to actively work on, or do I just let it run its course?
Okay, well, you could do either, but I would suggest actively working on something. And when you get dreams where you get stuck, you get put in situations that just don't work. You know, you have to get from A to B, and there just isn't any way to get from A to B that you see but you try this way, that doesn't work. And you try some other way, and that doesn't work. These are frustration dreams where you get put into a situation that frustrates you. And of course, those are lessons for you. How do you deal with that frustration? You see, and I suspect you've gotten better at it already, because the worst answer to a frustration dream is to get angry, to get upset, you know, to react to it in a negative way. But as you get better at it, you begin to accept that, all right, it's not going to work this way. So you work around, or you just drop that dream and stop it. You know, maybe it wakes you up because of the frustration. So then you make sure that you don't get started again on that if that works. But the point of it is for you to produce and create the solution yourself. In other words, if you are driving someplace and you have to take a detour, the detour ends in a ditch. But it's really, really important that you get there because there's something that you need to do there that's very important, and you're very driven to do it, and then you go another way and a tree's falling across the road. Well, what you need to do is take charge of that dream, levitate yourself and your car, and fly there and drop down in the parking lot of the place you need to be. In other words, the thing for you to learn is to take charge. You don't have to be stopped by the things that stop you. In a dream, you've got a very loose rule set. You can do all kinds of things. So you might also call that becoming lucid in the dream, but not necessarily. What it means is that you just have this, well, I won't let that stop me. I'll find some other creative way. I'm not stuck just by the things that are sticking me. I can go around that some other way. Or you look at it and you say, well, do I actually have to be there? Is it that important? Or do I just think it's that important? Is it just me? Maybe it's not that important. Maybe I'll just go home and take a nap instead of trying to get from A to B. But dealing with it in a positive way rather than dealing with it in a get upset sort of way. And that's why you keep getting those, because you need to master that. And once you do master that, you'll get 3 or 4 more of those. Just the system's testing you to see that you really have mastered it. So it gives it to you in a lot of different contexts. And then after that, it's gone. You don't have those kind of dreams anymore. Those frustration dreams just disappear. So it's been a long set of lessons for you. And you will eventually, if you just let it ride, you will eventually work your way out of it. Like you've made some progress on it probably already. But if you know what it is you're supposed to be doing, that you're supposed to solve that problem in a positive way, either a creative way, or just realize that you really don't have to be there. This is not your thing. You're not really in charge. You know, the whole world will not cave in, you know, and disappear because you don't do this. You know, other people can take over for you. If, you know, you're not indispensable, you don't have to do this, or you can do it in some other way. So it's the stay positive in the face of absolute frustration is the key. And if you think about that, then you'll be better at it. So taking a proactive part is probably gets you through it a lot quicker.
It's interesting what you said about taking control, but not necessarily being lucid. That's something new to me. So
yeah,
this is something.
Well,
I
what
need
it
to
does
learn
is
and
it's just, see, lucid is you become aware that you're aware. Okay, that's kind of lucid. Oh, I'm aware that I'm dreaming and now I can do something else. But you don't have to be, that's lucid. You don't have to be lucid. All you have to be is have in your own mind that you will find a way. And you aren't restricted just to the normal ways. Like I say, you're driving a car trying to get someplace, or what you have to do is you're a short order cook, and you're just there all by yourself, and suddenly 100 people show up at your little stand and they all order something at the same time, and you've got this impossible job and you just can't get there. And every time you put an egg on the darn, grill, it just slides off and falls on the floor, you know, and it's just this frustration. So it could be lots of things like that. Well, what you do is you just take control with your mind, and you suddenly use your intent to produce 100 eggs sitting on a skillet or sitting on a grill. Even if the grill's only this big, you can put 100 eggs on it in your mind. And you just solve the problem by going outside of the normal constraints. And that is a really good lesson, because life will throw you all kinds of problems, and most of them have solutions. They just don't have solutions that you're aware of because you don't think enough out of the box. You see, that's kind of typical. Well, this teaches you to think out of the box, and you don't have to get lucid. You just have to have an attitude that when you get stuck with an impossible problem, think out of the box. Don't let it get you upset, because as soon as you get upset, you can't think of anything. Now you're panicked or in a rage or upset, and that just totally traps you in the situation. So that's the thing. You don't need to be lucid. You just have to have this sense of, okay, there's a barrier. Oh, let's get around that. And the system will probably throw another barrier at you too. You know, oh, you're going to fly. Oh, well, then suddenly where you need to go is behind a big dome that you can't fly to. And, you know, but then you just deal with things positively, or you come to the conclusion, well, I guess I just can't get there today. I'll try it again tomorrow. But it's a positive conclusion, not an upset conclusion. So.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it.
All right, moving right along. Mark Castro, you're up next.
Tom, I would like to know, we are like our free will awareness unit partitioned off having our experience of this lifetime. While we're doing that, is our IUOC fully engaged like in this lifetime, as in this experience, or is it doing something else? Is it learning or engaged in other activities, so to speak?
Well, to answer your question very fundamentally, is that you're kind of pushing the metaphor further than it was meant to go. You're stretching that metaphor. The model I have is a metaphorical model. They're metaphors, all of them. Larger conscious system is a metaphor for source. And
I understand that it's
the IOC is a metaphor for that part of you that is the collective, the thing that grows, the collective consciousness, and lots of lifetimes, but they all get collected to this one source. So it's that one source. And then the free will awareness unit is a piece of that IUOC, which then has that experience. But they're all kind of metaphorical, because the way I made the model is, well, logic demands a certain function. It demands a cumulative function. Otherwise, nobody will ever grow up. They'd just be a whole bunch of disassociated experiences that won't add to any learning unless you have just one thing learning. So that's a part. So I make a IUOC to represent that part. But the individual part, that's a little different, so I make that its free will awareness unit, because it has a different logical function than the other part. So I just make that model like that. And now you're looking at that IUOC and saying, well, hey, what does it do all day at work? Is it just hanging around twiddling its thumbs while the free will awareness unit does all the work? Or what? What else is it doing? And I could make up things like, well, you could call that, your higher self. Oh, you could do that. Okay, it's busy being a higher self. Or you could make other things up, but they aren't fundamental. They don't really represent fundamental functions of consciousness. So I don't go there. There is no fundamental function of consciousness that defines out as a higher self. It's not necessary. You can do all the functions of consciousness that are necessary for a complete model without going to things like that. So that's just my model. So my model really doesn't tell you what the IUOC is doing all day at work, while its free will awareness unit is off having a set of experiences. Now, it could be, we can make some things up. It could be assessing all those 10,000 lives and seeing if it can come up with more clever ways of learning the things that it's having trouble learning. It could be communicating with other IUOCs and learning better, more effective processes for helping its free will awareness units grow up or something like that. But basically, I don't talk about any of that, because now we're making things up, right? We've turned to conjecture. And I try to not have any conjecture in my model, just the basic logical necessities. So I don't really know what the IUOC does all day. It's undefined. It's just a metaphor that serves the purpose as the collector part of consciousness, because that is a fundamental function of consciousness.
Okay, cool.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. Emad, you're up now.
Yes. First, I want to thank Vanessa for arranging this meeting, and I thank Tom because of taking his time. And I say happy birthday to Tom. Sorry, are you hearing me?
I hear you just fine.
Oh,
Yes.
sorry. I have two questions which are interrelated. I want to merge in one question. The first question is, what is the purpose of evolvement for LCS? I mean, why does LCS need evolvement? And the second question is, what's the benefit of evolvement in these lifetimes and reincarnation of IUCs? I mean, do IUCs gain more pleasure and joy in every lifetime, or they're just tools for LCS for the entire evolvement?
Okay, two questions. I guess I'll do them in order that you gave them. Why does the LCS need to evolve? Well,
yeah.
The LCS just started out as a very simple piece of consciousness. I started out my model with an assumption that consciousness exists, but I started out with consciousness existing in the most elementary form possible, and that is an awareness that is aware that it can be in state A or state B, state 1 or state 0, a binary. And that is the primordial consciousness. That's all it's aware of. But from there, if you have that, you can evolve, because if it's aware that it can be in a 1 or a 0, then it can be in a 1 and then a 1 again, and then a 0 and then a 1 and then a 0 and a 0, and it can make, so it can start making information. So that's all that needs. That's the what do we call it? The the fundamental set of things that it needs is just that one simple thing. Now it has to evolve, and it evolves by lowering its entropy, creating information. Now, why does it need to evolve? Well, if all we had is just one little reality cell that could tell this from that, we wouldn't have all that we have now. We wouldn't have the system that we have. We wouldn't have this virtual reality, because it couldn't do any of those things. So it had to evolve to discover patterns of patterns. Then it had to create regular time by flipping a cell and making a metronome. And then it had sequences. And then it had to evolve by taking pieces of itself, subsets of itself, and calling those and giving them free will, so that it had to interact with them. And when it did that, that created the potential. Each one of these inventions, if you will, each one of these aha moments as it evolves, trying to lower its entropy, creates more possibilities for the system. And that last one, where it created a lot of IUOCs, that created a lot of possibilities, because how can a lot of independent things interact with each other? Well, there's many ways, particularly if there's 7.5 billion of those independent things interacting with each other. There's just lots and lots of ways that can work out. So it creates possibilities for itself, more room to grow, more directions that it can grow in. It did not start life as the embodiment of love. When it first created those IUOCs, it expected those IUOCs to get out there and care for each other and be cooperative and build up things that were low entropy. And those IUOCs didn't do any of that. Those IUOCs just did whatever they felt like doing. And the system started by, reacted to that by trying to pressure them. Hey guys, look, that's not what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be caring. You're supposed to be creating positive information. And of course, they didn't pay any attention, because they were independent. They did whatever they wanted to do. So the larger conscious system started to bully them, started to, force them, until it found out that all of that was counterproductive, and that made everything worse. It had to learn. So it had to evolve to the point that it realized that free will needs to never be overrun. You need to let free will make its own ways, and it will grow up in its own way and in its own time. And any effort to speed that up actually slows it down. And when it came to that conclusion, then it realized that love was the answer. Caring was the answer. So it's had to evolve. And it is continuing to evolve. What can it do, and how can it support us in our growth? You see, so then it got to the point that, well, we had all this consciousness in the big chat room, and that was nice, but nobody was learning much, because there weren't very many consequences to being in a chat room. So there wasn't much pressure to grow up. So it says, well, we need a different environment, an environment that has more, a better rule set, that creates context, creates, choices that have importance to them, significant moral choices. So it created a virtual reality trainer for us to log on to, that it's full of choices, life and death choices, survival choices, interacting with lots of other people choices, lots of opportunities to cooperate or to be self-centered, whereas those opportunities were very small when it was just in a chat room. So it's constantly evolving. And as we evolve, it has even more possibilities, because lower entropy creates more possibilities within the constraints of the resources that you got to work with. So as we evolve, then it can evolve even more, because the possibilities of us as a system now are all evolving together. So there's certain ways that it can interact with us when we are very unevolved. You know, if we're all, you know, a bunch of Neanderthals in the control power force game, then it's harder for it to interact with us to help us evolve. As we start learning, we start becoming open to love is the answer and start working on that, then there's a lot of ways it can work with us. A lot of ways it can interact with us. You know, wow, we can give guides and we can have all sorts of things. So what it does and how it does it and the techniques it uses and the process it's come up with are dependent on us. So it's constantly evolving as we're evolving. So you have to think of it as a whole system that's evolving together. So we need to evolve because if you're an information system like consciousness is, you either evolve or you de-evolve. Staying right in the middle and not changing is not a stable state. You can't do that forever. If you try to stay in the middle, you're going to slip slide one way or the other, probably to the negative side, probably to the de-evolution side. You have to keep working on it or it goes away. So yes, now if you just look at us, what do we get out of our evolution? Well, we get rid of fear. For us to evolve means getting rid of fear, getting rid of ego, getting rid of beliefs. And what that does for us is it gets rid of misery, it gets rid of pain, it gets rid of bad relationships. So we end up a lot happier and a lot fuller, a lot more satisfied. And as we get more satisfied and more caring, our ability to help goes up. As our ability to help goes up, then the whole system grows up faster, you see, which changes the way the system has to work with it. So everything is connected to everything else. We're all just really one thing, and that's consciousness. But by breaking itself into these pieces and doing the things that it's done, it's made its evolution a lot more effective. And we're part of that strategy. So it's all wrapped up together.
And my second question was, what is the benefit for the IUCs when they evolve? Do they gain more pleasure and more joy in the next lifetimes?
Well, sure. They are us. You see, we're not separate from them. We are them. You know, what are you? You are basically an IUOC. If you're miserable and unhappy and struggling down here, then your IUOC is miserable, unhappy, and struggling. That's the level your consciousness is. If your level of consciousness development is, say, poor, and you struggle and have a lot of pain, well, that's the level of your consciousness. You are your consciousness. You're not something else. So your consciousness is not all that grown up. Your consciousness is trying to grow up, trying to evolve, trying to make better choices. So yes, we are it. You know, somebody says, who am I? I'll say, I'm my IUOC. My IUOC lives forever. My free will awareness unit comes and goes. It's just a piece of that consciousness that is getting experience inside the entropy reduction trainer called our physical universe. So that's what it is. But who am I? Really, I'm my IUOC. That's who I am. And if I'm evolved or de-evolved, that's the way my consciousness is. That's the way my IUOC is. It's evolved or de-evolved the same. So yeah, as I grow up, I here in my free will awareness unit being grown up, I'm happier because my relationships are all good with other people. But the IUOC now is happier too because its relationships and its and its interactions in the trainer are all good. So it's a more powerful being. It grows up and sees a better life. So it's just us.
I mean, my question is because in religions, they say, for example, if you are more caring, more loving, you will go to heavens, for example. They use these. I want to know if this kind of reasoning is right in religions or this is wrong.
Okay. Well, there is no heaven and hell per se as religions frame it. Neither one of those makes sense. If the system is trying to get people to evolve the quality of their consciousness, then putting them into a situation where they are constantly tortured and made miserable isn't helping them grow up. That would be very counterproductive. That just makes it worse. And putting them in a situation where they're no longer growing, where it's not a growing situation. Oh, you go to heaven, you know, we'll give you a harp, teach you how to play it, set you on a cloud, and you can do that forever. That's not very growing up either. So both of those things are no growth options. So they don't exist because they're not functional. You know, they don't lead anywhere good. They don't evolve. They're just, you know, if I, you know, I guess it'd be maybe my prejudice, but I would say those things were created to help manipulate, you know, members of an organization. Because if you tell people, oh, come join my organization and you'll grow up, it's like, yeah, well, why do I need to do that? No thanks. But if you say, come join my organization and save yourself and go to heaven and, you know, have all the wonderful things all forever instead of burning and being tortured the rest of you. Oh, well, okay, sure. Now, how much do I have to pay? 10%? Oh, that's cheap for that. So it just is an easier sell if you have something scary. Fear is a tool that people use to manipulate other people. So you make something scary up and then give them a way to avoid that scary thing. Now you have a tool that will manipulate people to join your organization and give you money. And I think that's the way that works. You know, even the Buddhists who mostly stay away from that, you know, in Buddhism, they don't have heavens and hells, but they had to do a similar kinds of thing. And that is, well, if you want to break free of the wheel of suffering, everybody here suffers. And if you want to get rid of that, well, then you come join us and you become enlightened. And once you're enlightened, you're out of here. You're not part of this suffering place anymore. It's kind of like heaven, you know, it's sort of the same kind of pitch, you know, except stay here, you know, you're already in hell is its pitch, you know, you're in hell already. It's not that someplace you'll go and you're going to stay there forever, lifetime after lifetime, unless you join us and then you can become enlightened and then you can get out of this place. So it's a similar pitch. So it's just a way to get more people to join. And if you have a lot of people, then you have a lot of power.
Okay, so Titti, you had a question?
Oui, yeah, sure. Okay. I will read my question so I get it right. It's about dealing with instincts in a modern digital world. Lately, I have been thinking about what you have said about men and women having different sets of instincts, and that especially the female instincts may not tie into the lifestyle modern women live. So I think I have also heard you say that if you go against your instincts too much, you'll become neurotic. So I've been thinking about how this applies in the Western culture, where many women spend so much time working behind screens of various kind. We live in big cities made of concrete. We, or at least I, have plastic plants. I don't cook. We don't do craft. And I kind of wonder, what does this do to us? And how women can live their lives in better alignment with their instincts. So especially when you consider that the life we generally live is so much about handling various tasks on a screen. So I wonder if this modern lifestyle can slow down fear work and create stress. Because I have currently been working a lot with the fears that create stress. And in this context, I have run into these questions about instincts. So could it be that some of the stress I experience in my daily life may be also caused by a lifestyle that is not aligned with my instincts? So this is about how women can live gracefully with their old instincts in a modern world, and if this modern lifestyle can slow down fear work.
Okay, and it's not just about women. Men are in the same boat. They
Oh.
have a very similar problem. Their instincts are not all that well aligned to the way reality is today either, and they also have struggles where they are working not in consonance with their instincts a lot of times, and it does create stress. Yes, when you do that, and if you well, let me start. So it's males and females both are in the same boat. It's not just women. Anyway, we come from we think of our evolution, okay? 200,000 years we've been Homo sapiens. So our instincts as Homo sapiens have developed mostly during that time, and all of that time, except for the last eye blink, which is maybe 500 years, is an eye blink out of 200,000. 500 years is not much at all. It's just a very short little time when you talk in terms of evolution. So in the last just 500 years, our environment has changed dramatically. Now, the environment is generally what drives instincts. In other words, instincts are things you learn in order to survive in your environment. So our instincts develop such that we would be able to reproduce and survive, survive and procreate, right? That's what you need to be successful here. And our environment was one that was very harsh, for all of that 200,000 years, except maybe the last 500 or so, or even if I say the last 1,000, well, 200,000, that's still, it's just 0.5% of the time we've been evolving. So you see, most of our evolution has been accomplished in a very primitive state where there was a very violent place, a very risky place. People didn't live very long. You were old when you were 35 in those places. You were kind of living longer than anybody else if you made it to 35. So we had this very high stress, high risk, violent kind of space in which we had to survive and procreate. And we developed instincts to allow us to do that and to do it effectively. Matter of fact, we're the only one of those hominid groups left. The Neanderthals, and there was at least 5 or 6 others that were also, kind of like us at that time, just beginning, and they all became extinct. We're the only one of the bunch that didn't become extinct, and that because we were better at procreating than they were. It's not so much we were that much better at survival, but we were much better at procreating than they were. And we basically overran them with population and eventually absorbed them. You see, so we're good at what our instincts have led us to succeed. And now here we are, and that very violent, rough environment that we evolved instincts to work with doesn't exist anymore. So that's why we're having problems, So for us to kind of meet those instincts and fulfill them and not get crosswise with them is a little more challenging today than it was 1,000 years ago. So men and women both are having to turn this corner and develop really different instincts. But you don't develop instincts quickly. It's not like something you work on for a week and your instincts are different. It's something that takes a long time. Now, it won't take another 200,000 years for us to change. Doesn't take that long, but it'll at least take 4 or 5 generations, something like that, to change instincts. And we happen, and it's been going on probably for the last 500 years, but the pace is picking up as our environment has gotten more and more different than that environment where our instincts developed. So just 300 years ago, well, our environment was somewhat different, but it was also somewhat similar to that other time. Now our environment has gotten more different than that one that supported our instincts. And we just have to make this transition period, which is going to last, like I say, 4 or 5 generations, maybe a millennia yet. And we have to make this transition. So there's going to be some stress. There's stress in transitions. And we're going to have to suck that up, because that's just happens to be where we are right now with gender. It's going to be a little stressful. But what we have to do is make that transition without getting completely crosswise with our instincts. In other words, we need to play both sides at the same time. We need to realize these are my instincts. This is the way I feel. These are some needs that I have, and I need to tend to those. I need to accept them. I need not to deny them. If I try to deny them and say, oh, I'm just not that way. Oh, that's the way it used to be, but not me. Then it'll make you neurotic, because you are crosswise with a part of your body that says you need to do this. Instincts are pretty strong. You need to do this, and you say, no, I'm not. I'm doing the opposite. Well, you probably end up with a lot more stress that way, and that stress will drive you crazy. So that's the problem, by just refusing your instincts and saying, well, they don't apply anymore. I reject them. That'll make you nuts. It doesn't work out too well. So you have to say, okay, I accept them, but I don't necessarily have to abide by it all. I can bend them a little bit. I can say, all right, I do have this sense as a woman to be a homemaker, to be, have children, raise the children, provide for them, nurse them when they're young. I have these instincts to do these things. And in as much as I can, I'll work with those instincts. I won't try to deny them. So you have that, and men have instincts that they are, the warrior, the guy who protects the woman and keeps her and the children alive while he's out, doing more dangerous things. So he has that instinct. Well, that's not so necessary anymore. There's not a lot of saber-toothed tigers wandering around, or other tribesmen that are, grabbing women and hauling them back to their tribe. And, that's not happening anymore. So the man's role is also very different now. But if they don't realize that they have these instincts and deal with them in a positive way, then it'll just ratchet up the stress to where it will make you neurotic. So there's no way to escape the problem, in the sense that things are different now. Your instincts don't exactly apply to life here anymore. Women pretty much had to stay in the cave because it was just too dangerous for them to get out there. And besides, they had 4 or 5 or 6 children hanging onto them, many of which were probably nursing and other things. So she was extremely valuable in procreation to keep the children alive and to do that. And it was just too risky for her to get out and walk around, outside where that would be a problem. It was just too violent a place. So that's not true anymore. Women can get out of the cave and do both anything that men can do. They can have jobs and do all kinds of things. So that doesn't apply anymore. And we just are going to have to put up with a certain amount of stress because of that. But if we do it really well in, let's say, 5 generations, we could change those instincts. We could tone the ones down that don't apply, and we could boost the ones up that are applying. But if we try to ignore them, or we try to push back against them, or we rebel against them, this sort of thing, then all we're doing is making it worse. We're not really changing them. Again, if you don't own it, you can't change it. If all you're doing is cursing and well, I'm not like that, then you're not changing anything. All you're doing is driving yourself crazy. So you need to accept, and then you need to bend And you need to keep a little pressure on for that change to modify those instincts, because life is very different now. So there's no way to escape. There's going to be some stress involved. Accept that and don't let it be negative stress. See, if we can keep the transition positive, then we'll make the transition so much more quickly and so much more easily. If we get negative about the transition, we won't change it. We're going to perpetuate it. So that's kind of the best advice I can give. You probably will not escape stress because of it, but you can eliminate as much of that stress as you can by being positive toward those instincts and say, yeah, okay, that's the way I am. You know, that's my nature as a female, or that's my nature as a male for the men, you know, and I accept that. And I see that now I have to act differently, or I want to act differently. You know, for women, they want to act differently because their world's opening up. For men, they have to act differently because their world is, for what they're responsible for doing, is kind of closing down. You know, it's not as the same as it was. So it's just a corner we have to negotiate. But be positive with your instincts. Accept them, even if you don't necessarily abide by them or feed them. But do it all positively, not with anger and not with being upset. So that's kind of the key of us modifying our instincts. Like I say, it won't take us thousands of years, but depending on how positive we can stay with the change, maybe 5 generations, we could make major changes with it. But we're not going to do it in a single generation. It's just too deep. That stuff is way too deep. But as we have our attitude to change, and if that attitude is positive, we'll find change. So,
awesome. Good, great explanation. Good. Titti,
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, thank you. I will explore that further.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Marco, is your mic working now?
I think so. Can you hear me?
Yes.
yes, we hear you fine.
Great. Thank you, Vanessa. Hi, Tom.
Hello.
The question I have is probably related with some previous questions. And it is, I'm going to formulate the question first, and then I'm going to add something. The question is, how does the system know that that we are making progress as a general in this virtual reality? And if the system applies any changes to this virtual reality or creates a new virtual reality, what are the ways the system have to know that that we are making progress, or the virtual reality as a general is making progress, evolving rather than de-evolving? And as you have mentioned before, we as individuals, we can know that we are making progress paying attention to our feelings. If we feel better and our life is full of joy, then it means that we are doing well. My question would be, what would be the similar thing for the system? How does it know that as a general thing that is progressing? Like one example that I can think of is like in the MBT organization, Titti made a survey that handed out to all the members of the organization, and we all responded to the questions, so that way we can have an idea of how well we are doing. So that's a way that we do it here, right, in this world. The question would be like, what are the mechanisms for the visual for the system to know about the progress?
Okay. Well, the system was struggling, like I mentioned before. The system was struggling with us, and we were its teacher as far as, it became love. It realized through dealing with us that love was the only way forward, and that anything else was just made problems worse. So it did that. That was a big learning. That's probably a really big learning for the system. And it wasn't that long ago. That just goes back probably, maybe 3,000 years, 4,000 years, 5, 10, I don't know how long our written records go back, about 10,000 years. So that's all that learning has taken place rather recently in that 200,000 years that we've been around. So its learning isn't that far back in the past either. You know, so it's new, but how does it get a sense of how it's doing? Well, I think it gets a sense of how it's doing, whether or not the things it's trying work or not. You know, it tries to help us evolve the quality of our consciousness. It tries to interact with us and give us the nudges that we need and so on. And as those are effective and we do grow up better because of them, then I think it believes it's doing the right thing. And as those things are not successful, it figures it's probably not doing the right thing, or at least maybe not the right thing at the right time. So it's constantly trying to figure out how to optimize how it interacts with us. Okay, and that's one of its, so we are actually one of its major teaching tools, is how we do affects, you know, how it does. Okay, now it also can create technologies like how to make virtual realities, you know, things like that, you know, mathematics. There's other things obviously that it does that it also can explore and get better at. So it has better tools and makes the virtual reality maybe more efficiently, more effectively. So it can improve its own tools, the things that it creates. That's another way. But it knows how we're doing by the quality of the choices we make. And often, if it wants to know at a specific time and place just how we're doing, it will give us a test. It will set something up. Same way the teacher knows how you're doing when you're in a classroom. They give you tests to see how you respond. So often we'll get a test. Those tests come in our dreams. You know, we already talked about dreams, frustration dreams. You know, when you get a lot of frustration dreams, that's a test at what level you are and able to deal with that frustration, but it's also an opportunity to do better. You know, it's a learning, it's a lesson and a test kind of all at the same time. When people try to go out of body, they want to learn how to go out of body. Often they're given a fear test. Something scary happens. And that something scary happens is sometimes the system is the something scary that happens. Sometimes it's just their own fear. But that if they have too much fear, then they shouldn't be doing these things, because they'll put themselves back. They'll de-evolve. They'll get more frightened than they were before. So it's better that they grow up some first before they try doing out of body. So those are the ways that the system tries to track us and what we're doing and our fears. But a lot of dreams that we get are tests of us, how well we're doing. How do we react? You know, suddenly in your dream, you're put into a situation where you have to make choices. What are you going to do? How do you react? Maybe it's a frustration dream. How are you going to deal with that? You're going to get angry? You're going to cry? You know, you're going to bang your fists on the wall? You know, how do you deal with it? And if you deal with it positively, then you pass the test. And you deal with it again positively 4 or 5 times, and it goes on to something else, some other learning tool that's more appropriate for you now because you passed that part. So that's kind of the way, you know, of the interaction with the system. So it's got some of its own tools and things it's developing that help it do more, better, more efficiently and effectively. And it's working with us. Everybody out here who sees themselves as a seeker and is looking for bigger pictures and looking to evolve the quality of their consciousness, the system will help. It'll be part of that process. And how well it does that is its test. You know, we test it all the time on how well it figures out how to do that and work with us. Mm-hmm. So does that answer the question, Marco, or am I not on the point?
No, yes, it does. And actually it made me, it solved another issue that I had because before I thought that why does the system need us if the system is so evolved, right? So, but now you have mentioned some things that make me think that that it really learns from us the way we learn from kids as well, right?
Yes. And
So,
you know, what you're thinking of is entropy. Well, if it's lower entropy, why doesn't, you know, and it wants the system to be lower entropy, then why doesn't it just delete all the IUOCs and say, okay, here I am. I've learned my lesson about love. Now the whole system is much higher entropy because, you know, it's just me and I'm higher entropy in all those IUOCs. So I just got rid of them and now my system's better off. It's not better off. You see, it doesn't have as much potential as it used to have. It doesn't have as much room to evolve into. It's limited. That's why it had to break itself into pieces to begin with, is it was limited. So you can't just say, well, okay, this book is a really great book and it tells a whole lot of people, you know, how to live. So I'll just duplicate the book. Now, you know, I've got much lower entropy now because now I got 2 books. Well, you can't just duplicate. You can't take, let's say, get an IUOC that has real low entropy. Oh, and I'll just take that one and duplicate it and they'll all be like that. That doesn't actually lower the entropy of the system any. All that is repetition. So just copying and pasting doesn't make things better. The only way to make things better is to grow up and to change who we are. The only way you lower the entropy of the system significantly is by making better choices. Copying and pasting doesn't get you there. So the system is stuck with us and we're stuck with it. We're part of it. We're all one thing, all trying to evolve. And it needs challenges as well. And we are its main challenge. So see, when it was one monolithic thing, it really didn't have many challenges. So it was limited as to what it could do. So that's the whole thing. The potential is so much greater with all of us involved in it than it is with if you just had pieces of it.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Tom.
Tom Campbell here. I and MBT Events hope you liked this video. We now have well over 1,000 hours of free video on this user-friendly, ad-free YouTube channel. Though these videos are free to our viewers, they represent many thousands of hours in production and editing, and many thousands of dollars invested in video and audio equipment, along with the required computers and software to store and process the raw video into finished products. So far, all of this content has been funded directly out of our own pockets. Be assured, we will always continue to do what we can. It's our life, our purpose, a labor of love that we will continue to pursue as best we can. However, those pockets are not as deep as they used to be. Thus, we are now seeking to augment our resources with support from our viewers. If you find something of significant value in our videos, please consider supporting their production through our newly created Patreon account or through a one-time donation. The links are in the description below. Thank you.